And thanks for joining me, everyone, and thanks for TikTok as well. Charles Moscowitz here. Michael D. Shaw is my guest, as is our habit on Thursdays at 7 p.m. live and podcasted. Mike, how are you?
Hey, doing great.
I want to talk about the Epstein controversy a bit here, in that, and I particularly, I am following Luke Thorborn from the National File sends me information. And also Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis. He's been a guest on my program. He is doing a bang-up job on this issue. He's really on a roll. I really urge people to check out his podcast. He's very knowledgeable and is very integrated in terms of what is the bigger picture. Jeffrey Epstein being only really a tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're looking at. I also want to give a shout out to Seth Holhouse from Man in America, who did a really good broadcast in terms of bringing up the spiritual aspects of this scandal and what it means. In a nutshell, I mean, this is a learning moment, I hope, for all of us, for everyone in this country, possibly everyone in the world, in terms of the most accurate glimpse that we have ever had in my lifetime, as far as I can remember, of the sort of inner workings of the establishment, what you might call. I mean, it goes by different names. And its most darkest side, its most dark secrets. Yes, the whole thing hasn't been released, but 3 million pieces of it have. There's 3 million more to go. And of the 3 million, there's a lot of things that have been taken out. However, there is enough here to work with in terms of looking at some of the machinations of how the international establishment works and how it has been working probably for generations. I mean, we could probably go back into history, but let's, for the sake of argument, talk about the more modern developments here. First of all, the Jeffrey Epstein controversy, I think, vindicates just about every conspiracy theory that I've been talking about and hearing about, going back to the John Birch Society and a lot of other things in terms of tying up how the secret apparatus works. Jeffrey Epstein was just a courier for a much broader and more international order of things. These people represent a certain mindset that we all have seen in action. I have certainly seen it from time to time up close, maybe not explicitly, but we're talking about an amoral, internationally minded, psychopathic way of thinking and belief system that seems to have possessed people in very high positions of power and influence. On a political level, the Jeffrey Epstein scandal has its fangs in top levels of governments all around the Western world. We know about the United States with the Clintons and with people in his administration. Maybe it's touched Trump, maybe not. I tend to think not, but some people say it has. We'll see. It's all over Washington, D.C. establishment, the city of Washington, D.C., which I think is a separate jurisdiction from the rest of the country. It's all over England, the city of the royal family. Aristocratic families across Europe. We know it's touched I believe, the Norwegian family. You've got the princess.
Which was to me, weird connection.
Her son is, they're offering there's weird stuff going. The Danish royal family offering their daughter for advice to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
What? This gets it well, and also I'm not going to shy away from the Israelis and their establishment and the Vatican, according to Jay Dyer. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein literally had a residence near the Vatican during the papacy of John Paul II, and it kind of, there may be some intersection between his work and the Vatican Bank, which is the world's largest and most secretive banks. You've got the sort of the official secret societies that we know as intelligence organizations, the CIA, the British organization, what is it, MI5?
MI5, MI6.
The Mossad, of course, in Israel. The Saudis are in it, the Sheikh in it, um, and that basically this is that they're operating not only in terms of political power and economic power, because they deal with manipulation of currency and central banking apparatus that controls the value of our money and thus our properties and more broadly our lives, but also a spiritual component here in terms of what these people are doing to children in particular. And, Jay has talked about, and other people have talked about some of these emails that talk about pizza, right? Remember the Pizzagate?
Oh yeah.
Completely dedicated. We might lose TikTok on that one. I don't know. We'll see. That handing out hot dogs and pizza, and just this weird sort of symbolism. I mean, that the FBI has referred to as references to pedophilia. You've got, children, references to, children as shark bait or some weird stuff like that, and certain practices with children, which really makes my blood boil. I mean, stuff that with children perhaps being bred or for this kind of activity. Jeffrey Epstein, I may also add, as basically, I think, more of an apparatchik in this entire international establishment. He was very much involved with here in Boston and with Harvard and with MIT, where he actually had an office at Harvard. And it was not just with Larry Summers, but Harvard at that time was very into this whole transhumanism, as was MIT. And I wish I had saved it at the time, but there was a website that they've since scrubbed, which bragged about their transhumanist experiments at MIT. I forget the professor's name. They've taken it all down since the Epstein scandal broke. But Jeffrey Epstein was very much involved with this. I mean, he was trying to have his sperm propagated around the world so he could have internal life. And it gets into this whole occultic business of killing, frankly, a child in order to take on their spirit and get superpowers. And
well, it's more than spirit. It was his whole adrenochrome thing.
Adrenochrome, which was to be extracted from a child who's been so traumatized that they create hormones that could then be used and injected. All right. I mean, okay, here we go. TikTok, that might be too much for them. Look, I'm not saying that I don't have any knowledge that these things are true. I'm simply reporting on reports by people that I trust, like Jay Dyer, like Seth Holhouse, like Luke Thorburn, who are reading these things and who are noting that these things are being fairly explicitly discussed in these communications that you have. And I'm going to say this is an opinion of mine. Because there is involvement with a fairly large number of Jewish figures and Israelis, I think that this is something that I've been talking about for years, and that is that it is part of the Sabbatean Frankist conspiracy. Let me just be explicit. The Sabbatean Frankists, Shabtai Zvi was a false sire in the 17th century who believed that he could bring about the Messianic age by committing every kind of perversion and every kind of subversion of morality that he could think of. And he was having orgies, and he was traveling around, and his wife was a prostitute, and his homosexual orgies and all of it. And he was exposed as a fraud, but before he was exposed, a lot of people, maybe who didn't understand, some of the details, flocked to him like a superstar. And eventually he arrived in Constantinople in 666, and was exposed by the Sultan, who said, okay, if you're the Messiah, then I'm going to shoot an arrow into you and you won't die. Whoop, all right, we got the violation on TikTok. That's enough. Thank you, TikTok, everyone. If you want to hear the program, go Rumble. Anyways, or you can live and convert to Islam. He lived and converted to Islam, but it's set up. I mean, the whole of Judaism around Europe and around the world, and even a lot of Christians kind of followed him too, were discouraged, and there was a great, this was a fraud, and there was a embarrassment and a gnashing of teeth. But what people don't realize is that his movement continued, and it went underground, and it included a lot of very elite people. And it's called the Sabbateans, and it basically was a secretive element that continued on in Judaism, and that there was a war against them within Judaism by very important rabbis like Jacob Emden and others. Someone should write a book about this, where they tried to expose this conspiracy and fight it. And they were partially successful, but not entirely. It continued. In Turkey, it continued as the Donma sect. Jacob Frank came later. He was a disciple of Shabtai Zvi, even worse, more evil. He was doing really disgusting and despicable things. And he was an absolute, insane perversions and overthrow of societies. And he and his entire followers converted to Catholicism. They lived in Lvov, which is now part of Ukraine. And at the time, there's a story that he said, I wanted, he went to the Archbishop, and the Archbishop said, we don't want you. We want to convert people, but what is your motivation here? Why do we want you? The rabbis don't want you. They're kicking you out. They've excommunicated you. What the hell do you think we're going to do with you? Well, the point is that they did convert, and it was the largest single conversion of Jews in history. And yet it was a pseudo-conversion, very much like Shabtai Zvi converting to Islam was not real. So they shifted. It's like a shape-shifting. They would become Islamic, then they become Catholic, and then they convert back to Judaism, and then they do this and that. The idea being to overthrow religions. Now, I don't know if there was a connection between this, and the Frankists also became secretive. Jacob, just as a footnote here, Jacob Frank's daughter, Ava Frank, who inherited his entity, there was a photograph of her, a framed photograph of her on the desk of Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. Now, I'm not passing dispersions here, but Louis Brandeis's mother's family, the Dembitzes, were a part of the Frankist movement. Okay, I'm not saying he was, but
I never heard that. Wow.
Yeah, and I think there's evidence that Sigmund Freud might have been in this as well.
Does this movement still exist today?
I think it does, and I think its name is Jeffrey Epstein and some of these other people like Lawrence Summers and wow. This Wexner guy who was Victoria's Secret and some of the Israeli people. I don't know. This is like I can't prove this, but certainly the philosophy of, if they don't actually exist as a secret society, with their goal being to overthrow not only Judaism, but the religious order and all nations. I mean, I think there might be a connection between them and the Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt, who was Catholic. But the point is that whether or not it actually exists, which we don't know, and I'm not going to try to pretend I do because I don't, what we do know is that their philosophy exists, and we now see proof of it. Secretive machinations in terms of controlling power through manipulation, through blackmail, through perversion, through getting people involved with activities. And Jeffrey Epstein was known to film people, and you got the Clintons going to that island and the tunnels and all of this. It became embraced because the Sabbateans were secretive. I think that they might have done something similar to what Adam Weishaupt from the Illuminati did, which was they infiltrated secret lodges, Masonic lodges, and they used them in the inner core. I'm not saying all people that are into Masonic lodges are part of this. Most of them aren't, and they have no idea. I'm talking about maybe, at least according to what I've read about Weishaupt, he would get to the inner sanctum of it. and they would be involved with controlling governments, controlling religions, controlling the culture, controlling economies, and controlling, influencing aspects of life, while at the same time operating almost as its own society, separate from the norms of law and morality. Jeffrey Epstein and these people were involved with some really sinister things, really, evil and disgusting things. It's satanic, if I could use a blunt term for it. And I think that it's being exposed. We need to make sure that we take this narrative and use it to really go further in terms of exposing the agenda. Right now in Congress, that testimony that I witnessed yesterday with Attorney General Pam Bondi, what I can see is that the establishment, frankly, is trying to play the establishment game of like making it into, oh, well, this is the Republicans and this is Trump, and he's got people in his cabinet who went to the island. What are you doing about it? In other words, it's all surface. It's all theater. It's all, it's acting. It's performance, to use the term coined by sociologist Irving Goffman, that they're all acting in a way that distracts from the bigger picture. And they may get away with it. I hope not. We have to be able to harness this information and go beyond questions of who and what, and show what this was. This is abusing children by numbers. I mean, Epstein at Harvard, when he was involved in transhumanism, bragging about cloning, bragging about, creating, through, what is it, Ray Kurzweil and his institute, a new kind of a human being. These people want to replace God, which is exactly what Shabtai Zvi and Jacob Frank conspired to do, even though they didn't do it openly. This is why it is a conspiracy. They couldn't do it openly because they would have been drawn and quartered if they did. And I think that, with the apprehension of Jeffrey Epstein, I think that it led to exposure. And I think that maybe we're just getting the tip of the iceberg. In fact, we are just getting the tip of the iceberg. My hope is that we can go deeper and we can stay on this. I encourage, the colleagues I just mentioned to continue to expose the information, to continue to research just what we have, never mind what's still being withheld.
Well, it seems to be nonstop. The big story in LA is Casey Wasserman.
What's that about?
Nation, who is the head of the LA 2028 Olympic Committee.
Yeah.
And there's massive calls for him to resign. At the same point, there's been a big defection of clients from his agency.
Yeah. What's Wasserman accused of doing?
Well, it's interesting, just that he's identified with Epstein. He was on a flight with Epstein to Africa. Just now, it's guilt by association.
Right.
Now, maybe he's done more, maybe he hasn't, but they're now just going after everybody who's had anything to do with this guy.
Right. And not everybody, maybe, a lot of people could have been, as they say, on the outside of on the outer portico, you know what I mean? They just were in it because Epstein was this very charming figure who had fun and had great parties. And, that's bad, but they weren't like on the inner, they weren't like, like Maxwell, and his media empire. And their intersection with the CIA and the MI5 and all of that stuff. That's not really necessarily what it is. These people are more small fish. Now, Luke Thorborn, who is one of my sources here, he says that, let me just see. Epstein associate Nadia Marchenko has gone missing. Now, this reminds me of a Clinton type situation, right? But he says that she testified about Bill Clinton. She pled the fifth before Congress 42 times when questioned about Clinton and other associations of convicted sex offenders and foreign intelligence community. Now she has gone missing. No one knows where she is. And Attorney General Bondi, according to this article, is expunging her name from the files. Now, I don't know enough about this to know what's going on here. I simply bring it up because it seems like one of these things that's kind of par for the course, certainly when it comes to the Clintons, right? I mean, we know about the body count. There's another one because the Clintons are about to testify. There's this one, but there's another one that all of a sudden has gone missing. Maybe there's a connection between this and Nancy Guthrie. I don't know. I mean, it was Savannah Guthrie who first exposed Jeffrey Epstein on television as a reporter. I don't know if people realize that.
Oh my gosh, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah. Now, I'm not making a connection between anything, but the Clintons do have this pattern of having people sending warnings to people in ways that can be most unpleasant, as they like to say in the mob movies. There's just a lot of stuff going on. You know, do I think that Trump's involved? I don't think he is, because I think if he were, they would have him by now. I mean, they wouldn't have gone through all the trouble.
Well, I think the most involvement you're going to find with Trump is that just because he was part of the New York social scene,
right?
He may have hung out with Epstein at one point or another. But the whole thing with the European connection is kind of fascinating. You have Andrew, who, by the way, now it's coming out. When he paid off Virginia Giuffre $16 million, that was all borrowed from Charles and Elizabeth, and apparently he hasn't paid back a penny of that.
Well, how would he? Never earned a penny in his life. I mean, he's one of these layabout royal figures. They don't have money. I mean, they just live on the high on the hog off of, other people. In the case of Britain, the tax.
I mean, there seems to be a kind of a meltdown of the useless portion of the royal family. All this crap is coming out about Harry and Meghan. Their false charities, their stupid business interests. Just a lot of interesting things going on.
And I think that also Juan Carlos of Spain, he had to turn the reins of the kingship over to his son and then flee. He left the country. I mean, he was about to be indicted for something. Berlusconi from Italy was involved. You've got, leaders from all sides just embedded in this whole rotten infrastructure. I mean, according to Jay Dyer, and I'm not here to get into this, but he says that the Vatican is involved. I mean, that John Paul II is involved. I mean, not saying he did anything, but, it might have been a connection with this and the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI and the death of John Paul I and other goings on. Now, I'm not here to know anything about it. I'm just saying that this is the very beginning, in a way, of serious research into this very troubling subject. Not because we're, not to condemn any group or anything. I mean, I wouldn't condemn Catholicism any more than I'd condemn Judaism. But that these are events to try to control and overturn the religions and nations. That, this is what Adam Weishaupt was trying to do with the Illuminati. That's known. That's not controversial. That's history. That's not a conspiracy theory. One of his couriers was arrested by a Bavarian police officer, and his courier, he had all these documents that were published, and that Weishaupt was then exiled from Bavaria, where he continued writing in exile in one of the German principalities. And toward the end of his life, there may have been a connection between him and this very secretive organization called League of the Just that eventually changed its name in 1948 to the Communist League, where they hired Karl Marx to write their manifesto. So, there are connections all over the place that go way back. And Epstein, again, it's only the most modern manifestation, but this is a moment. This is like the Bavarian cop picking up Weishaupt's courier. There are events that can happen that are not expected. This is like, Hunter Biden's laptop. What about him? I mean, there's somebody that seems to fit the
Well,
mold
I
of.
think what's going to come out of all this right now, they're trying to make it political theater.
Yeah, exactly.
Those various congressmen yesterday
Oh my
who
God.
were trying to get Pam Bondi to, quote, apologize to these Epstein victims, as if I'm not really sure what the meaning of that is. She didn't do anything.
You see the way they were screaming? I mean, that's Trump derangement.
Yeah.
And even that guy Massey. The what?
No, I mean, she called it Trump derangement.
Yeah, I mean, but
she answered back.
Having a complete.
But here's the other thing, which people don't like to discuss, so I will. You can certainly argue that taking advantage of a teenage girl is wrong. However, no one pointed a gun to these girls' head to go on this stuff. As far as we know, they weren't kidnapped. They were offered money. They went along. Okay, great. You made a mistake. Were you a victim? Well, I guess you were. But 20 years later, to be parading around as a victim, I don't know. Doesn't wash too well with me.
Well, the question is, how old were they at the time? I mean, some of them might have been underage.
Well, they were all underage, but then they
which makes it rape.
Voluntarily went on this stuff. So yes, they were taken advantage of. But maybe that's something that, okay, Virginia got her money, and then, by the way, mysteriously died pretty young.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if something like that had happened to me, I probably wouldn't want to, tell the world how stupid and how much of a victim I was. That's just me. Maybe they're trying to monetize it. God knows. Does that make it right? No. But that's distracting really what's going on.
Yeah, but that's at least they're exposing it, and I mean that's.
Right, but I mean, aren't the real victims the ones that can't talk about it?
Yeah, and we don't.
Were there babies that were killed? Were there kids that were sacrificed?
Well, that's the question. I mean, that's what I'm interested in. It's much broader than, sexually abusing teenage girls. And as awful as that is, of course, it's rape. And I'd love to see people brought to justice. I doubt if anybody ever will. Nobody ever. And I'm not even sure that it would be great. It would be satisfying to see that. I'd love to see the Clintons brought to justice. But it's not going to happen because of the power of this international elite establishment. They're not going to let it happen. Maybe they might throw a couple of people to the wolves. I don't know. But the bigger question is, who are they? If these girls want to talk about it, let's get information. Let's have some journalists like Jay Dyer, like Seth Holthouse, like us in our own small way, dig into this and expose it. Identify it for what it is.
Okay, but
you raise a context that shows social forces in the world.
What's going to happen? I mean, the guy that was been the most publicly exposed is Prince Andrew.
Right.
All right. Nothing has happened to him other than maybe a magnification of the fact everybody in the world knows he's a big a-hole. All right. So now it's a little more, public knowledge. But that's it. He's not going to go to jail.
No, nobody is. I mean, do you think the Clintons will ever? I mean, I'm sure they'll testify and they'll plead the fifth. They put Ghislaine Maxwell in jail, fine. But no one else is going to, really be looked at too deeply. In a way, I actually agree with some of the people who were interrogating Pam Bondi and that, they are still withholding a lot of information. There are still 3 million pieces that need to be exposed. I mean, there's still a lot of redactions. That's not good. I mean, her and her assistant over there, I think, have decided to do that. Maybe they're I don't know if it's so much that they're protecting Trump. I think that they're
protecting sources. There's people who are underage who don't want their name mentioned. Okay, here's a good explanation. for all these victims that came forward, there are probably dozens more that really don't want to be identified, don't want to come forward. So how long does it take to do proper redaction of 3 million documents? If they didn't do it, then the Democrats would be complaining, oh, look, you got all this confidential information out there, you exposed all this. So I don't care about what they say. They're all full of it. I think, at least let's expose the people involved. But, you're going to come to the same basic conclusion, unfortunately, which is when you get to the top of virtually anything, you're going to find major, major, major corruption. I mean, you've seen it in your own life, right? Whatever the field of endeavor, you get to a certain point and you wonder, wait a minute, how the hell did this guy get to this position? He's a moron, How did he get there? All right. Well, he knew this guy or that guy. He was part of this group, that group. You see it everywhere all the time.
Yeah, they're part of this, people that wanted to rub shoulders with Epstein, even after he'd been convicted, which is interesting. Yeah. There must have been some power. Oh, really? Why? What about her?
Well, I mean, long after he was exposed.
And I think the women on The View, right? Whoopi and them, people. And, they're screaming. If I were Pam Bondi, by the way, I mean, all that screaming at the top of their lungs. I mean, people that have gone completely Trump deranged. You have to release everything. I would have said, okay, fine. We'll release everything and we'll unredact everything. And you're going to see who ends up frying as a result, because I think that most of the people in there are part of this liberal Democrat establishment, maybe a couple of rhinos mixed in. But
well, that's the old Shakespeare thing. He thinks the lady doth protest too much, right?
Yeah, they're like daring her. She just said, okay, you asked for it. Here it comes. I mean, it's Wall Street, it's City of London, it's all of these nexuses of power that really have manipulated and managed the way we see the world.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure that a lot of the the medical establishment is deeply involved in it. Even I'm getting a degree as a sociologist, and my sessions this course are medicine, healthcare, and sociology. And my sociology professor, who's the author of the book we're reading, not only admits, but proudly wrote how corrupt the medical establishment is and became, particularly in the 1980s, with the development of drugs, where the articles, the surveys and the research done of these drugs was really corrupt in many cases, in that they would do a study where they would only bring on healthy people, very healthy people, after interviewing them as opposed to random. And they would do the study very quickly so that any side effects could be, ignored since the study was over. And they wouldn't, she mentions one drug in particular that had very bad effects on children, and they just left that out of the study. That this has become a routine. This is the other thing that is mentioned in my textbook, and this is by an establishment, liberal author here, is that starting in the 80s, the drug could put on numbers of people who would be listed as inventors. They'd get a portion of the patent. That's how Anthony Fauci made his money. They would hand out these patents to friends, and we're talking like 20, 30 patents, all of which have money attached, especially if there was a contract with Medicare or, some of the big HMOs or whatever to use.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this, because some years ago, I would get in these heated arguments with people that would talk about, oh, yes, you need the gold standard, double-blind, random controlled trial.
Right.
And they had no clue how easy it was to dink those results. They had no clue.
Yeah. I mean, even like in my statistics class, we talked about how statistics can be biased and manipulated. You have to look at who's behind them. Um, it's shocking that a large percentage of the articles, peer-reviewed scholarly articles in prestigious publications like The Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine, were not written by the people who signed them. They were written by the drug company.
Oh, absolutely.
And then they got some professor who was on the, let's face it, on the take, or just getting some grant to sign it. I mean, it's shocking that there's that number. I mean, what does this have to do with Jeffrey Epstein? This, and we've talked about the war on poverty, which cost a conservative $35 trillion, and it has done nothing. It all goes to this growth in a level of power at the hands of these international operators who really are not of any real use to anyone, and they've lost their moral rudder if they ever had one, and they're just involved in a. I mean, it sounds like I'm describing like a secret society at the top levels, because I am. They operate to a different set of rules. We've
but
talked.
The good news, Chuck, is it's being exposed. It's being exposed, and we have alternative media. All right. Back in 1950, this same kind of crap was going on, but you wouldn't have heard about it. All right. Because there was no alternative media other than maybe some guy that would use a typewriter to create a newsletter or something. But there was no way that it could be promulgated to the masses. Now you have Nick Shirley go out and expose these.
But it's gotten so much worse. I mean, maybe they've concentrated and accumulated more power and more wealth into their hands to the point where they've been able to expand. I mean, $30 trillion is a lot of dough to be passing around and hitting up palms on the street and giving it to these consultants and these nonprofits and these people who are just bilking the system and living on high on the hog, to the point where you can have this Jeffrey Epstein phenomena, which is maybe you've always had these kinds of scandals, but the thing that makes this one unique and that we need to understand is that it represents such a pervasive way of being that goes well beyond any one nation, any one society, any one religion, any one organization.
Well,
it's entrenched.
Maybe the way to counter this, though, is just more exposure. You have to get people to start thinking about these things. All right. The basic fallacy with the war on poverty was, as with all these social programs, was that X amount of money can cure this problem. If we take the ills of society and we just throw money at them, everything will be perfect. Okay? Which doesn't address the fact, well, yes, there's some people with genuine disabilities. Most people who are poor have made some pretty poor decisions in their life. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Instead of that, throwing money and creating all this corruption from these NGOs, how come no one ever raised the idea, maybe we should be promoting the nuclear family? Maybe we should do something about the 70+% illegitimacy rate in the Black community. Because the answer obviously is not giving them more money.
No, I mean, if anything, that they have subverted these institutions. I mean, Daniel Patrick Moynihan warned about this in the Moynihan Report, published in 1965, when the war on poverty, so-called, was just getting off the ground. At the time, he was an assistant secretary of labor in the Johnson administration, and he noted that at that time, the American Black community, the marriages were intact, the education level was good in terms of literacy, and the morals were solid in terms of a very strong Black church. and that he felt that the implementation of this massive national welfare program would erode those values, and that it would destroy their families. And he was absolutely
yeah.
But the bigger issue, besides destroying the black family by and other poor people, it's not just blacks, by awarding the woman for getting rid of the husband with money, and then giving more money for each child, and having these fatherless homes where you have, and then to have a socialistic approach to business which regulated it and made it difficult to function in more minority neighborhoods, which resulted in unemployed, young, fatherless black men who really had no direction. And then you introduce, of course, drugs. I interviewed the late Gary Webb, who did a huge exposure on the introduction of drugs by the government during the time of Iran-Contra. Said a lot of the money was pouring in from Central America onto the streets of Los Angeles and other cities, and that the money would go to these international agendas, these operations. And at the time I interviewed, they went after him. The Mercury News, he also wrote a book, very legitimate journalist. At the time I interviewed him, and I don't ever tape, this is before tapes, he was pretty depressed and low energy, and he committed suicide. You have other exposures of how drugs were introduced. MK Ultra. You had Jolion West and these psychologists handing out drugs like candy on the street, LSD. All like a human experiment, an interest in social control and manipulation.
Timothy Leary, Harvard University.
Aldous Huxley. Right? Yeah. Brave New World. He's wanted a world on. He said that it wouldn't be too long before the entire world was an informal concentration camp controlled by drugs. How wrong was he? Not too wrong. A lot of people, right? People are all taking them now. And then you have a demonization of the last line of defense. You had corruption of the black church. You had, Margaret Sanger, with Rockefeller money engaging in the Negro Project, which convinced black ministers, mainly because through money, to support abortion. And so she could build abortion clinics in black neighborhoods to get rid of what she called dysgenic races. You had the promotion of every kind of sexual deviance in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And then the last line of defense were the police. And they were demonized. They were attacked. Now they're being interfered with as they try to enforce the law.
Well, have you ever wondered how easy it was to get people to sell out? Does that disturb you just a little bit?
Yeah, it's exactly. What is their price, right? Isn't that what a prostitute is? What's your price? What are they?
If you look at these black church officials that were bribed by the likes of Margaret Sanger, you have to ask yourself, what does it take to go traitor on your own people?
Well, we could look at any of these sort of Jeffrey.
I'm not just singling them out. That's just an example.
No, of course. It's they are all compromised. Blackmail is a big part of everything. This goes way back. I remember reading about Woodrow Wilson was blackmailed because he'd had an affair after the death of his wife with a married woman, and it was held up, and it forced him to engage in stuff like entering World War I. I don't know, just whatever they were trying to get him to do. And of course, his handler, they always had these handlers, was Edward Mandell House, who wrote this semi-fictional book called what was it? Philip Drew Administrator, about a character who became fascist dictator of the Western Hemisphere. He was very much influential in getting America embroiled into World War I. you had, the whole change of the year 1912 with the implementation of the direct taxation, the Federal Reserve Act. You had return of the central banks that Andrew Jackson had gotten rid of, and the control of our currency and the value of our property by a cartel of private, domestic, and international bankers and investors. We don't have control of our currency anymore. That's not the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 says that Congress shall regulate the coin and the value thereof. And by coin, they don't mean literal coins. They mean, it's a term for currency.
What is the realm?
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it may be. That's no longer happening. Instead, our money, the value of our money is decided by these international bankers. Jay Dyer accurately gets into the Rothschilds. They didn't invent this. It goes before them. It goes back to, I would argue, the Knights Templars and the Fugers and other banking families. But they brought up a certain level of private banking by sending out his sons to all of the capitals of Europe and possibly the United States, where they were involved in intelligence gathering, fractional reserve banking, which was lending out more money than they had in the vault in terms of gold, and thus manipulating the value of currency and getting nations on the hook for which increased their power. It's not just them. It's not, and were they part of the Sabatian Frankist thing? I think they might have been. I don't know. They're very secretive. I mean, the Rothschilds, I don't think they have the power they once had, but what I do know about them, and by the way, one of them is deeply involved with Epstein, is that they pay ad agencies to keep their name out of the press. They want to they're very private. Did they have to do with, Jay mentioned that they played a role in the establishment of the State of Israel. I would say that maybe is one of their virtues. They were involved in helping set up the Jewish National Fund, which purchased land in Israel from the Ottoman Empire with the idea of having it be a pilgrimage site for Jews. And this is when the Jews started to develop a Palestinian identity. The word Palestine was meant for Jews. The Arabs didn't think of themselves as Palestinians. They thought of themselves as Arabs. So, I'm just to point that out, in that Jay was a little mistaken on that one. But I guess my point is that you have an element in Israel, and I think it is expressed in the Mossad, which I think was created by the CIA and the OSS, of intelligence gathering, rather shady practices, some rather unsavory activities, and it's all patented in this sort of international order that Jeffrey Epstein represented. Now, the only thing that I would point out as a little caveat with regard to the Mossad and Israel is that, as bad as they may be in terms of some of the practices, they are trying to defend a country from a genocidal agenda. And they are taking, at times, rather extraordinary measures to accomplish that. And sometimes those measures may not be exactly pretty, right? But I think that what they do has to be viewed in that context. Now, as far as Britain is concerned, as far as the CIA is concerned, and the banking establishment, they're not dealing with that kind of a threat. They're just corrupt. They have a world order agenda that they've lost any kind of semblance of connection to basic notions of morality. They're just they have an agenda that views people as human resources as opposed to human beings.
Well, the biggest exposure of the CIA, of course, they're out doing whatever they're doing, and they somehow didn't notice that the Soviet Union was falling, which I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Who knows what was going on there? But look, ultimately, the fall of the Soviet Union is a good example. They do fold and collapse on their own rot, on their own contradictions, ultimately. The only question is, how many victims are they going to take along before they reach that point? How many genocides, how many holocausts are they, how many mass starvations and destroyed lives and horrors are they going to perform before they are ultimately exposed? I think that recently you do have, I'm encouraged by leaders such as President Trump and growing numbers of others who are starting to save their countries and save the world by rejecting this rotten internationalist establishment and reasserting normal, natural things like national interest, which is a reflection of personal interest. You know, operating in a means that promotes the best interests and the best welfare of their own people, as opposed to some weird, unspoken, agenda that's driven by, the Epsteins of the world. So, I mean, I'm encouraged.
You're seeing things turn a bit of a corner.
Yeah.
The fairly negative reception on the Bad Bunny halftime show, which, for whatever reason, they tried to
the following dropped in half when he went on.
Yeah.
And by the way,
they manipulate these ratings, but the fact that they don't want to tell you is, in September of last year, Nielsen came up with a whole different system of metrics, which tends to inflate what the ratings used to be. So the fact that the Super Bowl ratings were down compared to last year is horrific, considering that by every other metric, including if you look at the playoff games, the ratings were way up compared to previous years. So it was a total failure. And one of the funniest things.
Yeah, you're freezing up a bit on me, Mike, but the point that interests me is that
to be cliche,
yeah,
white liberal women on the street. Would you like to see what the lyrics of these songs are? And he starts.
I heard this. It'd be really like.
He starts reciting them. They start walking away because it doesn't go along with their agenda. And then you get into one of my favorite points that originally I think was raised.
All right, Mike will be right back. We're having there we go. We're having some technical problems here. I don't know. Did Mike step in something? I don't know. There you are.
You hear me?
Yeah, I think he might have really stepped in it there, Mike. I don't know. But all of a sudden, I'm having technical problems.
Well, yeah, there you go. Anyway, Vin and now Andrew Wilson talk about when you ask most people why they believe what they believe, they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. And if you look at these women that were praising the Bad Bunny thing, and they're showing one little fact about, hey, it was kind of degenerate, actually, they don't want to know. Because
I've seen this myself. I mean, some of the lyrics were, let's just say, misogynistic and rather vulgar. Yeah. And by the way, the FCC is supposed to regulate these things by
they cleaned up most of
children.
They cleaned up most of it
for
the show. All right. The other thing was, and I made a point of this in my article. You can talk all you want about, wow, you should learn Spanish. Okay. I will lay down a bet. You could take a native Spanish speaker, wouldn't have understood half of what this guy was saying because he was mumbling in this rap style. So, as a native Spanish speaker, you would have a better chance than me, who's a California guy that could kind of sort of get by in Spanish. I was having tremendous difficulty, but
I mean, I don't see any reason why we should have to learn Spanish anyways. Why any more than we have to learn Swahili? This is an English-speaking country. English we should be grateful that we have one predominant language that kind of ties us all together, that at least, even if we don't agree, which we don't, at least we can understand each other. We can all have a common means of communication. That's a very important value. It doesn't matter if it's English. It doesn't matter if it is Swahili. The fact is, it happens to be English because that's our tradition. That's who came here. And so thus it became English. Latin America became Spanish. That's fine. But we should honor.
Beyond that, though, what does the average person, Hispanic or otherwise, have to do with working in sugarcane fields, twerking, two men simulating sex acts?
I heard about that. I didn't see it, but I heard. Okay. And by the way, isn't sugarcane a symbol of slavery? I mean, wasn't that like the, the slave trade? And
how is that positive? I didn't understand why he starts out with the cane fields. But moreover, what does it have to do with any state in the continental United States? How is that a shared experience exactly?
And by the way, the guy that was selling burritos and tacos, he had a sign up there saying "Wick is welcome," or something like that. I mean, it's it was very discouraging, and I think that the ratings dropped in half when he went on, and they went to TPUSA show, which had unprecedented ratings. And now there's a lot of people are calling for Goodell to resign, and that they've had enough of this sort of social programming and get back to football.
Well, I'm afraid that they have done a good job of killing the golden goose. Again, as I referred to in the piece.
Yeah.
The game was terrible. The commentary was terrible. The analysis was terrible. Why were people watching it? I mean, the only way to engage the audience at that point, the game is a joke. So you start gently making comments like Dandy Don Meredith did, or even John Madden did, but they didn't. They didn't. All they had to say, I mean, the thing that blew my mind, the Patriots quarterback, and you're a Boston guy, the Patriots quarterback ran a close second for the NFL MVP award. He looked like a deer in the headlights out there. Yeah. It was one of the worst performances by a quarterback in Super Bowl history.
That was very bad. I mean, he was living.
If you're commenting, and there's supposedly 120 million people who are watching it, how about saying, "Gee, what the hell's wrong with this guy?" You didn't hear anything like that.
No, I mean, that was sad, and it was a lot of build-up in Boston around it, and I mean, people that I talked to said, "Oh, they're not going to win," but you were.
Well, what's the feeling in Boston after they saw that game?
Miserable.
I mean, the offensive line looked like it didn't show up.
Yeah, it was bad. It was just all around, and I mean, who knows? But the point is that as a cultural event, I mean, football seems to have been damaged by this.
Oh, without a doubt.
People over the head, and that it started. I mean, I was listening to Steve Turley talk about this, another good podcaster, by the way, that it really started, the slide started with Kaepernick and his kneeling and, over alleged police brutality against Black men, which, by the way, has been debunked. Heather McDonald, who I've had on my program and who's a great sociologist and thinker, she did a deep dive into those statistics and the criminology element, and found that really was all wet. That's just horse manure. That and it's just not really true. But that was the agenda, or remains the agenda, and that was the beginning of the end, or the slide.
What do you think is going to happen to Goodell? How could you be a billionaire team owner?
Yeah.
This guy's getting paid $64 million a year. Think about that. For doing what? For destroying what Pete Rozelle built.
Single-handedly, completely destroyed American football with his stupid politically correct, male rage. Remember that? I think a comment by General Milley, right? I mean, he's like way out of touch. People who are into that are losing. Look at these dumb Olympic athletes. I mean, now the Olympics have gone down. No one's paying any attention to it. They came out, oh well, I don't represent the American flag. Really? I mean, it's all they've been told what to say, and it gets down to the legitimacy of Trump.
But who's behind this? How do you purposely kill the golden goose? What's the motivation?
Either they're so deranged by Trump hatred that they don't care, or they think that it might actually take a toll on this movement and on President Trump, and it's not. It's not going to work for them. Everything, Trump is moving ahead like a steamroller. I mean, you have, the economy is getting better in spite of all their lies. You've got, I think that, foreign policy, Cuba is going to be collapsing by the end of the year. I mean, that's something that
I've heard that they can't even turn the lights on now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have Venezuelan oil has been cut, grabbing Maduro. I mean, the point is that the Western Hemisphere is electing pro-Trump leaders. They just elected somebody in Chile. They just elected someone in Costa Rica, Honduras, Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, the Western Hemisphere is moving.
So what do you think is going to happen in Cuba? Everything falls apart.
I think it's going to be replaced by a more democratic government. I mean, they can't sustain that. The only reason they did sustain it all these decades is because first the Soviet Union, and then probably
there's some grassroots movement in Cuba. I mean, I don't know this. I'm asking you. Some grassroots movement where suddenly Joe Blow is going to step up and be the new Democratic leader.
Well, then they'll just have to continue suffering. I mean, it's up to the Cuban people. Ultimately, just like it's going to be up to the Venezuelan people. Do they want to continue to choke under the jackboot of leftist communist leaders? Or do they want to enter into a better way of being? I mean, where it doesn't mean they have to be like the United States per se. They obviously have their own culture and their own domestic nation and should. But there are certain principles that allow for prosperity, like individual rights, like private ownership, like faith, right? Heaven forbid. Anyway, but in many ways, I feel encouraged. But we have to stay on the Epstein story. I mean, if there's nothing else, I'm trying to interview people on this. I think that it is the biggest story to come out. Well, I mean, in a negative sense, in a positive sense, the biggest story was Trump's reelection. But this and his movement, which I'm obviously will continue covering, but we have to stay with what we're learning from the Epstein files and who we're learning and who's involved and how, what are their beliefs and where did it come from? Because exposure really will change things. That's why we have a free media. That's why we have a free ability to communicate. The founding fathers didn't give us, didn't recognize the importance of a free media, unlike the left will say, well, that's so you can say the F word. No, it's so you could actually investigate and identify evil and expose it so that we can get justice in the world, so that we can get equity in terms of calling these people out and showing who they are. Now, would it be if they get punished? Beautiful, but I don't even care.
Just the fact that it's being exposed.
Truth. What do you have coming up on the Substack?
Well, I put out that piece a couple of days ago on Super Bore 60, and I go into some of these issues that I briefly mentioned.
Yeah.
So there's I got a lot of email on that. People feel that way. Hey, they've ruined the game. The stuff that we mentioned here. So, look,
all right.
I hope it goes down and maybe they'll be able to fix it.
Well, I think it's heading in that direction. I mean, maybe it's not too late. Anyway, Mike, but I'll